The Agile Toolkit.
I'm your host, Bob Payne, and I'm here with George Dinwiddie on this Lean+Agile Meetup. Hey, George, how's it going?
Oh, doing well.
Great. I use that intro because it's the intro that I use for the Agile Toolkit podcast. I've not done a lot of recordings lately. I'm going to reboot it in 2021. But George Dinwiddie is a great friend of mine for many years now. The co-chair, one of the co-chairs of the Agile DC conference. He's been a guest on the Agile Toolkit for many times in the tips and advice section, and most recently the author of Software Estimation Without Guessing. So a little intro to you, George. Did I miss anything?
Oh, that's good enough.
Okay, great. So I wanted to start out really sort of thinking about this year. And unfortunately, I've been thinking about it way too much this year. But I wanted to see what your thoughts were, George, about what is changed in 2020 and what are you looking forward to in the Agile space in 2021.
Well, so I'm looking forward to getting out and working with clients in physical spaces again. There's a whole lot about working with a client that comes from just sort of seeing what's going on. And one of the big advantages of bringing in an outside consultant is the fact that they notice things that the people who are there every day no longer notice. You get acclimated to stuff and you don't see it anymore. You're used to it. It's the way you do things. And you may not think of some alternatives. So that's a big advantage that it's harder to do when you're remote because you're dependent on somebody else's eyes noticing things and reporting things.
Yeah, I think we've seen the same at LitheSpeed. The engagements need to be much more scheduled, and when they're scheduled, you don't have those just serendipitous learning moments. I think remote also requires a lot more written communication rather than the face-to-face communication that we might need. A lot more structure in the agendas and what we're the interactions tend to be a lot more formal than they might be in a regular coaching consulting engagement.
And a lot more preparation.
Yeah.
Using tools like Mural can help, but you have to prepare those in advance. You can't just walk up to a whiteboard and start doing stuff, or take some flip chart paper and have everybody get involved in something. Yeah,
I found that I have a document camera, and that's been very helpful, but it's not interactive. It's just me drawing, which is clearly not the same. What trends have you seen in the way folks are utilizing techniques in remote Agile teams? Does that change at all with the move to 100% remote for most folks?
It's hard for me to get a wide view of this, but I noticed. Back in March and April, suddenly a whole lot of people became instant experts at remote collaboration, and wanted to teach classes in it and such like that, I think many of those were not so much experts as they had done it once. and so the results may vary. This is not something that you can come up with a recipe that guarantees success, because it involves people. And I think that ties back to the way Agile works. there's a lot of people who build themselves as agile coaches because they've done it once. And they want to try to replicate the same experience that they had with different participants. And
Mhm.
that's just not going to happen because it depends so much on the participants. So you kind of have to look at, what are the principles, and and pay attention to, are you achieving the results you want, and what can you change to do it? Collaboration over virtual means is not an easy thing to do.
No.
Yet I've been in some sessions that did it very well. And I've been in some sessions where when things weren't going as planned, then, they were able to adjust in real time
Mhm.
because they had become familiar enough with the tools. And, but then there are times where, a lot of the participants don't have enough tools to be able to make use of the things that people have set up.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, we did a lot of work early on in the collaboration space and trying to figure out how to make that work, especially in the training space, because most of our classes, I mean, we really valued the exercises at the tables and being face to face, and it did take a really concerted effort to try to get better at that. And I see my own classes improving month over month as this has gone on. I will enjoy being face to face. I don't think I'll enjoy the getting on a plane every week. The commute has been amazing. For those of you not in the DC area, although I know we have some folks from LA. DC is pretty bad. It actually is easier to get to Houston or Dallas than it is to get to Tyson's Corner, because I can get down to National Airport and just get on a plane. Yeah,
I like to call it world-class traffic.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, yeah. What are some of I would love to get some comments in the chat, or if you want to come off chat. We are recording this session. You're welcome to. But what challenges have folks on the Meetup scene moving to remote, and what do you see happening in 2021? What changes will stick? What's going to end up being reversed? Any thoughts there? How about you, George? What do you think's gonna stick from this remote world? And then we'll go to Steve, because I see he just came off.
Well, so I think there are a lot of people who, a lot of software developers are introverts by nature. And I think there's a lot of people who want to stay remote or stay remote most of the time. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be hard for companies to say, no, that doesn't work here. So I suspect that there's going to be some long-term shifts.
Yeah, I mean, one of the clients that you and I worked at in Columbus, they're going to keep about 20% of their workforce remote, and they were very, very invested in face-to-face collaboration, physical visual management systems, but they actually found that they were able to go remote and be productive. So that was an interesting outcome. Steve, did you have a comment? I saw you. You always have a comment, so I would imagine you might have.
Always. You make it sound like I talk too much, and Aubrey would tell you I probably do. So.
Well, it's the battle of people that talk too much right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, happy holidays, everyone. So I'd love to
Thank you.
Wish you all happy holidays for that. And one of the things that I noticed is, no matter how good we get with Teams or Zoom or whatever, when there's a large group of people, there's often these one-off conversations, these side conversations that are taking place in workshops that are very powerful. When I normally do a story mapping workshop, which we recently did one virtually. Normally, you get people at a table or up against a wall, and if it's at a table, it almost looks like it's a craps game, because everybody's talking and shouting to each other, and they're pushing things back and forth, and it's very, very interactive.
Mm-hmm.
And when we did it virtually, because you could have one person speaking at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And like Bob, you and I would have a challenge having a side conversation while Audrey and George are having a conversation that just wouldn't, it's very challenging in the virtual world. So
Yep.
those additional conversations, those brainstorming sessions, I believe are far more challenging in the virtual world. And I think one of the things that we're going to see is when we get back into June, July next year, whenever that takes place, is we're going to have our collaboration days. So people will still be in the office. But I think we're still going to be mostly virtual, mostly remote, but I think we're still going to have those face-to-face times.
Yeah.
And hopefully traffic will be a lot lighter in the DC area, because there'll be fewer of us, because to your point, Bob, it is challenging. Yes.
Yeah.
So Steve, one thing, I've had a couple experiences recently with some tools that let you move around on the screen, move avatars around on the screen, and you can have multiple conversations. Whoever you're closest to on the screen is louder than those that are further away on the screen, and you can approximate that. Now, I've only had a little bit of experience with these sorts of things, just playing with it a little, but there's some potential there. There's some things coming that'll help some of these difficulties that we had when being thrust suddenly into the virtual world.
Yeah, I haven't used any of those tools. Are there specific ones?
Oh, I don't remember the names right offhand.
Okay.
I'd have to look back at my notes. But
so Coco is one that I think is fun, because people can jump into different rooms.
Yeah.
But that's the only one I know of that makes it so easy to bounce in and out of different rooms and conversations.
So this, you could actually hear, one of these that I played with, you could actually hear multiple people, but you could just move closer to the one that you wanted to hear better.
Yep. That's great.
So it wasn't even a room concept.
Mm-hmm.
There's some that have concepts of tables, where there are conversations around a table, yet you have some visibility into what's going on at other tables at the same time. So I haven't played with those. Those all seem to cost money, and I wasn't willing to spend a bunch of money just to try it out.
I just used Hugo Chat this weekend, participating in an open space on Saturday. This is Sheila. And Remote Forever did a summit a while ago where they used a tool I'd never heard of, and I'm not thinking of the name right now, but that was useful. I mean, there's so many of them out there. And one of the things you find is that about the time everybody figures it out, they change it, or in a different organization, they have a different set of tools or a different combination of tools you're allowed to use if they have a list that are acceptable for them. So it's going to be an ongoing thing. But when you talk about collaboration days, I can't see myself ever doing those, because it's bringing us into too close contact. And I'm not convinced that even the vaccine is going to be enough over the long haul. I think it's going to take years before everybody's comfortable being in close quarters again.
Yeah, very, very possibly, which does not bode well for Agile DC, because it's the conference center that we hold it in is one of the things we enjoyed about it was the fact that it brought community close together. So we'll have to see how that pans out.
You can in the rooms, though. I mean, you can make it so that, I mean, Power to Fly was another one that did a bunch of things that went on simultaneously. Mm-hmm. Where I don't remember what tool they were using. I think it might have just been Zoom, but you can set it up so that people can wander in and out of different meetings the same way that they could in the physical world, in the virtual world. I mean, there are a number of tools and they keep getting better, and I keep thinking I'm going to compile a list, probably do that over the next week or so of the ones I'm familiar with. And I'm sure my list is incomplete, and they keep improving them. I mean, a lot of them keep introducing improvements every week or so.
Yeah. And we use Sakoko and do enjoy that quite a bit. and that really allows you to pop in, have a quick ad hoc conversation with someone, pop out, and it looks sort of like a physical office. There's usually a little lunchroom, but unfortunately there don't seem to be any bathrooms, which is one of the weird things in Socopa that always bothered me. But so I don't know. But that's just me. Yeah, in the chat we had some comments that they're hoping the same for LA traffic. Yes, agreed. And that most organizations are going to keep some work from home capabilities, or more than there certainly were in 2019. And that we have seen effects in the real estate market, especially in places like New York, San Francisco. That certainly is happening. So my thoughts about the PMP going Agile in 21. So PMI, interestingly, has had PMI ACP, or Agile Certified Practitioner. They recently purchased Discipline Agile Delivery from Scott Ambler. And so I expect that we're going to see more and more Agile embedded in not only the PMI's overall offering, but in the PMP itself. I don't know if they're going to eliminate the ACP. That's a very good question. Yeah, Agile Certified Practitioner. Do not know that.
No, they're not going to eliminate it. It's going to become part of their portfolio.
Great. Great. Thank you.
Bob, if I may, I'd like to propose a topic about customers, because I feel like, a lot of Agile is about customer collaboration and, those tight conversations and understanding with building the right thing. So I'm wondering if anyone here has had to deal with challenges just collaborating with customers this year. I mean, if we all went virtual, did you used to do something in person, or is it easier to talk with customers or do surveys or whatever you do? So that's my question.
I recently set up a set of interviews with some of our customers, and normally I do the interviews over a cup of coffee or lunch, because everybody has to have lunch, right? And so you can always find time there. However, now we have to do them virtually. And so far they're working out okay. So so they are doing that. Scheduling has been a little more challenging, because I don't have I'm going to buy you muffins and coffee, and we'll sit down and chat for 45 minutes or lunchtime. So the scheduling has been a little more difficult, but the one-on-one communications have been actually pretty good. And the group challenges, the collaboration, I think it's still there's a challenge there.
Yeah, I think from a LitheSpeed perspective, we immediately realized that our customers' challenges were, their world was changing drastically. And we scheduled and continue to schedule formal, customer discovery calls, and have really doubled down on getting the voice of the customer, because you can't just have a side conversation at a training or at the water cooler to sort of get a feel for what their challenges are. So we've ended up reaching out to a lot of folks as well. George, any thoughts on customer discovery or how that has changed?
Well, yeah, it takes a lot of intention and willingness on the part of the customer. One thing I notice is a lot of people are zoomed out, and they don't want another video call. On meetups like this, back in May, you'd see a lot of, almost everybody had their cameras on. Mm-hmm. Now, when I go to a meetup like this, then very few people do. Mm-hmm. And everything takes a lot more time, because you're in an environment where you've got unrelated distractions around you. Mm-hmm. And so everything takes more preparation, it goes slower while you're doing it, and you don't have full attention because of what else is going around. And you may not be aware of what else is going on around those people because you can't see it.
Yep. Yep. I've found a standing desk has been just the best thing for keeping me engaged on the video and doing training, because I used to, when I was in a physical space, well, I'm in a physical space, but when I'm training face to face, I'm constantly walking around. So this standing desk has been a real plus to that. I don't think I could do as many Zoom calls if I had to sit down. Occasionally I'll go down and sit at the kitchen table or something and try to do them, and just, it's just exhausting, and it's a lot better to have a standing desk. Got a question in the chat that says, based on the PMI ACP, how will the PMI ACP differ from the PMI PMP? And I know we have some folks on here that may have a deeper understanding of that answer, but they've always been sort of a separate certification. The body of knowledge that was around the PMI ACP included extreme programming, Scrum, Kanban, Alistair Coburn's Crystal methodologies, because he was on the committee that developed the learning objectives. So I don't know about the PMP. So I don't know if anybody has a quick answer to that question.
Yeah, Bob, if I may.
Yeah, please.
So this person, Alpesh may be referring to the change in the test. So the PMBOK has been elevated from the 6th edition to the 7th edition. More stuff's been added. So the test is being modified for that.
Mm-hmm.
But they really do see the Agile space and the traditional space as two different spaces, because they have a plethora of Agile certifications.
Mm-hmm.
The DASM, the DASSM, something for value stream, and something for something else I can't remember off the top of my head. So they really are seeing this as two different worlds,
Mm-hmm.
traditional space and an Agile space, and they have techniques for both.
Great. And as we approach 25 plus years for Agile, for us, that is our tradition, right, George?
Yeah. Everything changes, and you have to go with the change.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I like to tell folks that back when I got my PMP, it was a bunch of hippies. Well, the hippies are now part of the PMI organization, so get used to it.
Yep. So George, I did not realize you had your PMP. Great. So I did want to make sure that we cover your new book. I was really excited to see that come out. You covered a lot of topics, much more in depth than we certainly did in the podcast. But yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit about the book and how your thoughts have evolved since we last talked about counting cards, story points, and estimation in other models on the podcast.
Well, so back in, I guess it was 2008, 2009 when we first started talking about counting stories rather than estimating them, and found that the teams we were working with had as much prediction power, or maybe a little more, in terms of how much they could accomplish in the next 2 weeks. We started down at that low end because, well, that's what people talked about. That's what the C3 project did. That's what Mike Cohn wrote in his book.
Mm-hmm.
And but as we started to explore that, 2011 timeframe, I realized that really wasn't what the business cared about. The business, yeah, the middle managers start worrying about what you're going to get done in the next 2 weeks, but that's only because that's what's been offered to them to care about, not because it's valuable
Right.
by itself. And the business cares about bigger things. When can we have this functionality? And what exactly is in that box of functionality is still a little variable. At least it is if you're doing Agile well. And this idea of long-term planning with story points gets people to try to do way too much work at the beginning, and then they've put all that work into it, so they've got to stick with it. I've had clients that said, oh, well, we can't split this story because this list of stories has been approved by the executives. And, and there's something wrong when that happens. Mm-hmm. So, it squeezes all the Agile out of it. So I did a lot of stuff, a lot of thinking about this, and, came to this realization. And so the estimates that you really need to provide to the business are a bit larger than at the story level. They need to be a little further out in advance. And of course, you don't know that much, and they could be wrong. And these are soft, fuzzy things that you're estimating. So, you can force them to fit sometimes if you need to. But I realized that one of the big, for the Agilists, for the people doing the work, one of the big advantages of estimating these things is then, as long as you estimate early and often, then when you get to a point and say, oh, well, we estimated we'd have this feature done by now, but we don't, well, that estimate that we made had assumptions built into it. We may not have been aware of the assumptions we were making, but that's a good time to stop it. It's like a test going red unexpectedly. Oh, what did we overlook here? And figure that out. If there's a problem with not meeting that estimate, take care of it the best you can. But then also look into the future. Yeah. Where else are we depending on that same assumption? Mm-hmm. And learn from it.
Yeah, when people ask me if they should go back and sort of correct the estimates in the past, I always say, no, use your energy to look forward, because you can always cook the books to make your estimates look perfect at the end.
well, that's how PERT came about.
Right.
For what was it, the Polaris missile project. So they had to show their plans up to Congress, and so they did the drawings after the fact. So they always work perfectly. Mm-hmm. But it's really helpful. To get situational awareness of how are things going, how are we doing at what we're trying to accomplish, and estimates help you do that. I'm finally getting around to reading Kahneman's book, and the thing is that your system one wants you to be happy and in this comfort zone all the time, and it'll lie to you and make you think that everything's okay, because it doesn't look too hard. It looks for confirmation bias. Mm-hmm. And so you have to kick off your system two every now and then to do a check on that. Or just live without the train wreck at the end when when you ignore reality for too long.
So I know that you explored a number of, so certainly you talked about comparative estimates, but you also talked about some different model-based estimation techniques. I have to assume, I haven't talked to you about this, but that probably led you into a reasonable amount of research in those spaces. So what are some of the nuggets that you dug out from that stream bed? Any gold there, or?
Well, so what models come down to, you're still estimating by comparison. But what you've done is you've taken that and encoded that comparison into a model. Now there are, Capers-Jones will sell you a really expensive, complicated model that probably is good for huge consulting companies doing government work. It probably won't fit the needs of a startup or even a moderately sized organization doing internal work, because the assumptions built into the model don't match the reality of that organization. I've seen people come up with models on the fly. They'll take things, oh, well, these are the ways that our stories or features vary in size and difficulty. And so it seems to be related to this factor. One thing I've seen people do is, well, how many screens are involved?
Mm-hmm.
And use that as one input to their model. How many external systems, does this talk to? And use that as an input. Unfortunately, I don't see many people then looking at how the results, the reality fit that model and tuning the model based on that. And even when you get into Monte Carlo analysis, there are lots of dials you can turn based on what you think is going to be.
Yeah.
Troy McGinnis has done a huge amount of work in this area, and is very knowledgeable. And he, for the experiences he's got some good rules of thumb for where to set those knobs, how long it's going to take, what are the chances of something going longer, and the different knobs he has built into his spreadsheets. And so it can give you a good starting point, but still, if you want that to work for you, you're going to have to say, oh, well, we got to the end of this. How did that work? Maybe we need to tweak the model going forward so that it works better for us. Or, perhaps it doesn't matter at that point. Perhaps it's good enough. And this is another thing. People often fall into the trap of, when they create a model, well, it's no longer a model to them, it's a calculation. And well, the computer's doing it.
So part of the system one thinking.
Yeah, it's you have to trust it. and it's precise. It gives you numbers with lots of significant digits.
Yep.
It's sometimes a decimal point.
Yeah. Yep.
And so it can give you a false sense of security. And you have to realize that estimates are not necessarily precise. And in fact, the more work you spend on making them precise, in my experience, the less accurate they tend to be.
Mm-hmm.
You lose the point. And
that's adorable. I love it. Sorry.
Thank you, Jesse.
So another thing is to think about what it is you want this estimate to do for you. Yeah. What question do you want it to answer? What decision is depending on it? And a lot of times it's very simple. It's just, hey, are we doing okay on this, or are we in trouble? Do we need, use the estimate or estimates, over time? Are we okay, or is something threatening us that we need to pay attention to? And that's a really good use of estimates, and it doesn't have to be, something that gets people upset.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything that you found in your research that you thought was surprising in any way, or was it really just a deeper exploration of that space?
It was really a deeper exploration. I was a little surprised at how many useful ideas I could come up with for estimation from the point of view of a software development team. People typically think, oh, estimation, that's just for management. And it's just so that they can hold us to this and treat it as a promise. Mm-hmm. And of course, that's not a good situation, but there really are valid uses for estimation. And in fact, we estimate things whether we realize it or not. Our system one mind is always estimating stuff. And the people around us already have estimates, whether we give them any data or not. You don't need data to make an estimate.
Yep.
Then,
Yeah,
the end of the book is a whole chapter on the people issues, because that's where a lot of the pain comes in. And so that's really what drove me to write the book, was not about estimation itself, but to try to get people out of the pain that often surrounds estimation in corporations.
Elaborate on that a little bit. What were your how do you feel the book is helping there?
Well, so this is part of it is I get into the Satir concept of congruence, and balancing the needs of yourself, the needs of the other, and the needs of the context of the situation around you. If you don't do that, you're going to get into trouble. And the reason I went with that model is because we very quickly get into blaming. You didn't meet this estimate. And blaming, when somebody is blaming you, that means they're not taking your needs into account. You know, they're only paying attention to their own needs. Oh, I promised somebody that we would have this done by such and such a date, and we didn't miss that date. And so therefore I'm going to blame you for missing that date. But if you can get it so that you're taking into account, oh, well, you know, there's stuff we didn't know when we made that estimate. There's stuff we tried to tell you about, but you weren't listening, or that we wanted to tell you, but we were afraid to, because you tend to blame people when things change. So there's that. There's stuff about, you know, the communication between people, which can go wrong very quickly, particularly in a low trust environment. But we go through a series of steps internally when we're communicating that go by so quickly we're often not very aware of it. And what usually gets shortchanged is right at the beginning is the actual data. What did we see or hear that led us to come to the conclusions that drive our response? So these are just some tools to help people with these human problems that tend to go awry, you know, in the context of estimation. There's no magic bullets here. It's nothing that you can read and all of a sudden all your problems go away. But it gives you some starting points to work on them.
No, you need to sell a magic bullet. I mean, if you want books to fly off the shelf, George, tell them it's a magic bullet.
Yeah, I'm a lousy marketer, you know.
Fair enough.
I'm not good at lying.
Fair enough. Honestly, I think part of the continuation of some of the pain and the problems that we've had in the community really sort of centers around the fact that we're not paying attention to the context, and you know, we kept saying we're estimating in points, so you only get to talk about points. And then we complain when management asks us, well, how many points are you going to do? But it's the only piece of that's the only thing we've centered on around our conversation many times in Agile. And then we wonder why it becomes this morbid fascination of the management team. Well, the reality is that they need to make commitments to their leadership, to customers, to the marketplace. And they are trying to do this longer term planning. And one of the things that I always do in my courses is try to talk about how can we make those longer term predictions, understand the uncertainty in them. And I mean, you know, you and I were working on portfolio alignment walls, doing long-term planning, and having a working session where everybody that was interested in when is this going to be done and we are building it, we're in a conversation. And I think that's the key thing that can happen in an estimation and planning context. But it needs to be a rolling wave conversation
Right.
with artifacts and tools that help center the conversation.
And when a date is changing, everybody's aware of it.
Yeah.
They see it move on the wall in that meeting. It doesn't happen quietly in the background where they don't realize it.
Yeah, in the comments, we've got this idea that estimation is an empirically constructed process and tool, and I think empiricism implies the feedback that you mentioned. We need to be able to get a little bit better over time if we can.
Yeah, and people focus so much on these story points, but really what happens within the sprint really is of no consequence to upper management.
Yeah.
If they need to know things at a granularity smaller than a sprint, then your sprints are too long. Because the sprint really is the heartbeat of the progress.
Yeah. How in the book did you deal with domains that are not particularly estimatable, or because the technology, there are too many unknowns, the domain that you're trying to solve are too many unknowns?
Well, they're still estimatable. You've got lower confidence,
Mm-hmm.
And you want to be aware of that. And you want to use less precision. You say, oh, we think this is going to be done next year, not, July 7th, 2021. It's ridiculous.
At 3:45 p.m.
Yeah. Yeah, close of business, which gives you till midnight.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, and I think that's, oh, sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah, that's the conversation we need to have around what is our confidence level, and it can vary widely depending on the type of work we're doing.
And like with most things Agile, the solution is to have more conversations.
Yep.
And open conversations where you're really sharing things,
Mm-hmm.
and understanding each other. It's got to be dialogue, not discussions. You have to go in, willing to be changed yourself,
Mm-hmm.
in order to be willing for other people to be willing to change their opinions.
Yep.
So it comes down to the people issues once again. And if you don't realize what their needs are,
right,
and they may not be good at describing their needs to you,
mm-hmm.
It's working with managers is like trying to develop a product for customers. The customer can't come and tell you exactly what they need in a product,
mm-hmm.
or they can, but they're not going to be right either. They're often working on what they think the solution to their needs are, rather than talking about what their needs are.
Mm-hmm.
And you may be able to meet their needs in other ways.
Yeah, and one of the problems that we have, and it's fundamentally the human condition, we have much more empathy for the people we work with day to day, the people on our team, product owners, developers, whoever we happen to be working with. And we view folks from the context, from the organization or customers, as sort of them. They're not us, they're them. And
Yeah.
One of the things that I often emphasize is you've got to understand the pressures that they're under. How can you have that conversation, have a win-win?
And from their point of view, one of the best things I've ever seen is when managers come and spend time in the team room.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do their work, in the, away from the carpeted row and the mahogany offices, and
Ooh.
share what they know, not coming in just as spies,
yeah,
but rubbing shoulders and being associated with the team.
Yeah. Great. So I wanted to make sure we had some time for questions from attendees. I got to get a little more mahogany. I'm looking around and it's mostly a cheap pine standing desk. But anyway, so wanted to open it up for questions. Any questions for George?
The Agile Toolkit podcast is brought to you by LitheSpeed. Thanks for listening.